the Genesee Literacy Network, along with my partner, Danielle Brown, on a series of back to school informational sessions that we thought would be very important for parents. And this is our third series. And this afternoon, we have some very special guests with us that we know is going to really enlighten and teach us and lead us in terms of mental health. We know that this is a very important topic in our community as well as in the country. And we just thought that this was an important discussion to bring to the forefront in our community. And so I'm just very excited for the guests to join us this afternoon. I'm Dr. Kimberly Leverett. I'm the Executive Director of Education and Talent with the Flint and Genesee Chamber of Commerce. And in education and training, we have many, many programs from cradle to career that support our community and support our families around talent development. And so that is the work that we do at the Chamber, and we have many, many partnerships. And so I'm just excited to lead this conversation this afternoon. And we'll just start with introductions. Let's start with Bianca. Bianca, can you just tell us a little bit about your background, your organization, and some of the services that you provide?
Yes. Thank you for having me, everybody. My name is Bianca Wilson, and I am a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Michigan. I'm actually working on a license for the state of Minnesota as well. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Umbrellas Behavioral Health Services. We are a behavioral health company that provides services for individuals with developmental disabilities and mental illness. We service adults and children. We provide in-home respite services, community living services, and also specialized residential services. We also offer program development for nonprofits or other agencies that are looking to develop mental health programs.
Great. Thank you for that introduction. Ebony.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ebony Duncan. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Michigan. I am the clinical director at the Christian Wellness Center. It is a telehealth company that provides counseling or therapy to families and couples. And we also like to do a lot of workshops. So we're always open to do speaking engagements about all things mental health and families.
Great, thank you. That's good to know. Okay, Miss Kenisha.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Kenisha Bell, and I am with the CRIM Fitness Foundation, the Mindfulness Initiative with the CRIM. So not the race, that's what everybody knows. But I am a yoga instructor and meditation facilitator. And so pre-COVID, we provided free community yoga and meditation services. Now we've moved to online where you can join us. The Mindfulness Initiative not only offers that, but we offer ACEs training, adverse childhood experiences. So if you're curious about that, we also have a few trainings just on developing your own mindfulness practice and also how to share it with youth.
Great. And then we have Miss Danielle Brown. Danielle, can you tell the audience how we came up with this idea for, these conversations around the back to school as well as your work with the Literacy Network?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Brown. I'm the Director of Partnership for the Flint and Genesee Literacy Network. And as we've been looking at all of the different things that are going on in community right now, one of the biggest concerns that we've been having is how do we return to school in the season that we're in. It's not just get pencils and backpacks. We have a very different experience that we're all going through. We're serving our own individual children as well as community children and families in different ways. And so I was thinking that this might be a great opportunity for us to bring together some local professionals who can provide a real resource in relationship to what can be done, what's normal, what's not normal, what's available, what's not available, what do we need to build out, but how do we make back to school better in a time like this? And so at the Flint and Genesee Literacy Network, our intention is to really focus on two generational approaches to addressing literacy, making sure that we have a consideration that the entire family is successful. And so what we want to do is come up with a range of different ways, from information building to convening, to webinars just like this in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. And so I'm just excited about being here. I'm excited about the ladies that are here on the line today. I'm excited about the sessions that we've already done that I'm sure that people will really be thrilled to learn more about. And then I'm also finally excited about the opportunities that we have going forward to continue to support our community in different ways, just like this. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for being here today.
Great. Thank you all for those great introductions. And now we'll just dive right into our discussion. Ebony, we'll start with you. What is mental health and why is it so important?
So, in short, right, in very non-clinical terms, mental health is simply a combination of various things. Our emotional and psychological, our very social well-being. And it's important because we don't always realize that it's directly tied to our physical health and vice versa, right? Our physical health is also directly tied to our emotional health. And so you think about the choices that you're making, how you're handling stress, our mood, our behaviors, right? All of that encompasses our mental health. And so, in short, our mental health is simply our emotional, psychological, and social well-being.
Great, thank you. Kenisha, did you have anything to add to that in terms of mental health and what it is?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Ebony, you did a good job. Thank you so much for that. I would say the same, that mental health and physical health goes hand in hand. And I think a lot of times we don't realize it, or we have physical symptoms, but a lot of times it's our mental. And I would just agree that it is our social health, our emotional health, mental and spiritual health. And so really noticing what we are taking in. And so a lot of times we look at our diet as our food, what we're taking in, which that directly impacts our mental and physical health, but also what we're taking in, what we're seeing, what we're listening to. All of those directly impact our mental health. And so realizing they do go hand in hand, and it's so much more that it encompasses. It's our emotional, mental, physical, and of course, like I said, social and spiritual as well.
Great. Bianca?
Yeah, I think you two ladies definitely summed it up. But kind of when I hear and think about mental health, I think about just that cognitive, piece. I know that it's other factors that go along with mental health that kind of contribute to our mental health. But I really think about that cognitive piece of us how we kind of interpret our environment and how our environment or things that we come in contact with make us think and feel and act in a certain way. And of course, if we're thinking, feeling, and acting in a certain way, that can contribute to our, physical health and things of that nature.
Great. Danielle, did you have anything to add?
Well, I think that everyone definitely shared broadly, and one of the things that I really am excited about, again, I keep using the word excited because I really am, but one of the things that I'm looking forward to hearing more and learning more about is that no matter what's going on with your mental status, how it is that we can help each other to be able to make it through, because some days are not going to be great mentally, emotionally, or physically, but some days will be fantastic. But how do we work together to support each other on those days when things just aren't going well, and not having the expectation that things are always going to be going well. And so that's all I would like to add to this. So I'm just interested in hearing more. Ladies, take us through.
Okay, so Bianca, I was wondering in terms of, mental health, and Ebony so eloquently described, for us exactly what that is. But I know that you guys have all kinds of assessments that, you use, but I was just wondering if there was questions that we can ask ourselves as adults in terms of maybe self-screening or self-monitoring to say, you know what, I think I might need some help. This is not normal behavior for me, or any of those patterns that we can to check ourselves.
Right. I think something that people commonly use, and I think that is something that, you necessarily don't have to be a therapist to utilize, is the ACE, the ACEs screening tool. just being able to look at your life in the lens of, you as a child, especially, and how you've grown up, the things that you've experienced, that essentially that study showed how those experiences truly affect, how you develop, in life. And so kind of being very cognizant of that, of looking at your family history, biological factors that you may have, life experiences, family history of mental health problems. You might want to just pay attention to things that, symptoms that family members, have been through. And if you start to notice those things in yourself, it may be, time to reach out and kind of just get clarity on those things. But looking at sleeping patterns, looking at your moods, looking at your decision making, those type of things are, that you really kind of want to pay attention and hone in on, and seeing if it's balanced and you're making, healthy decisions, if you're feeling good. If you're not, then I would say that would be time maybe to even just ask the question, to somebody professional. And I don't think we necessarily have to say an assessment or anything like that. It's just simply talking, just saying, hey, I've noticed this in myself. This is what I recognize, and what do you think about this?
Okay, thank you. Kenisha?
Yeah, I think just that constant check-in with yourself, asking yourself, how are you doing? And being honest about that. Noticing, like Bianca was saying, noticing the patterns. And if you maybe notice like you're a little off, maybe for a week, say, you know what, I'm going to kind of journal what my habits have been for this past week, just so I could kind of do that self, assessment and then seek the help that I may need. Having a partner, maybe somebody, a friend or somebody where you guys just check in with each other and ask each other, how are you doing? And different ways that you can cope. Also, social media, as much as we want to stay away from it, from the bad, it's positive things. It's following certain pages that can remind you of different self-care techniques and tools that you can have to check in with yourself and notice how you're doing.
Okay, thank you. Ebony?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with what the other ladies have said. I think very simplistically, right? Because a part of the issue that we have with mental health is that we often overcomplicate it. And so I always like to keep it very simple. And so the question often becomes, when you're checking in with yourself, is how do I feel? Not how should I feel, right? Because society tells me that I have a roof over my head and I have food on my table and like my kids are healthy and I have a job to go to. So I should feel happy, right? I should feel grateful. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how do you feel as opposed to how should you feel. So if you ask yourself, how do you feel? And then do what Kenisha said and just be very honest with yourself and saying, you know what, I think I feel pretty irritable. I've had some mood changes. I'm not enjoying hanging out with my friends as much anymore. I just want to sleep. Whatever it is, right? Whatever those honest answers are, I think that's just the question. Like, how do I feel? And then answering those questions and deciding if your answers aren't what you want them to be. Okay, now you can decide. Maybe it's time I reach out to a professional to try and figure it out.
Okay, great. Thank you. Danielle?
Kimberly, I would have just wanted to add, I wanted to add that one of the things that I'm noticing is that people are anxious, but they're not being given permission to be anxious. And societally, you're not supposed to be too excited about anything. You have this, as Ebony was sharing, you have a roof over your head, you have transportation, you have a job, you're working at home, you have all these things, but you may have an extreme amount of anxiety because you're trying to keep it all together. And so being able to talk about not feeling good, and I also like the idea that someone that Kenisha had suggested that you would pay attention to keeping maybe a peer or someone that you communicate with regularly, that you check in with to make sure that if you're not feeling good or if you're questioning, am I a little off, that someone who's honest can say to you might be a little trippy right here. So, and that as well as when Bianca was mentioning thinking about family history, and thinking about things that you've seen in your family history that were very concerning and allowing them to be real, but then thinking about how to access resources to help you to maneuver through. And so I just thought all those answers were really helpful in supporting the idea of being your most genuine self, being your most authentic self, no matter what it is that's going on at that time.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about, we've had this conversation about adults, but I also wanted to talk about what should parents and educators look for in children. Some of the behaviors that children may come to school with. I know me as an educator, one of the things that I looked at is my students' attendance, whether they were coming to school excessively tardy or whether they were excessively absent, or whether a child came to school and they were always crying and always sort of emotionally challenged there. That was a red flag for me to maybe locate the parent or the teacher or even the social worker to ask questions about what is going on with this student, and how can we get them the help that they need. So from your experience, what has been some things that you would look for, and advice that you would share to a parent or an educator to look for in children? Ebony?
Sure. So you've already said some of those things, right? I think that when we think about children, we often think that they have no reason to be stressed, right? But for some of our children, the stress is the right word to use, because it's what they are depending on what's happening in their home. And so I think one of the biggest things that tells us that a child emotional health maybe could use some help is if a child is always sleepy, right? It's not always because they aren't physically getting enough sleep. Sometimes it's just like this mental exhaustion that they have going on from trying to figure out multiple things that's happening in their world, right? And then by the time they get to school, which is supposed to be a safe place, they actually feel safe enough to sleep, right? So that's kind of like one of those physical symptoms.
Yes.
That has a very emotional underlying thing happening there, right? And so, and kids are also very honest. Most of the time, you ever listen to a kid tell a story and you're just like, I don't know if I need all that information. So they're very honest, just kind of listening to what they're telling you, right? And being able to take what they are saying seriously, like actually listening and not just brushing them off. I think it's just two of the biggest things that need to happen in our education system.
Yes, thank you. Kenisha?
Yeah, thank you. I would say definitely like the change in behavior. Sleepy definitely is one of them, but really noticing too if they're a little bit more hyper than normal. Noticing if they're kind of complaining of stomach aches. A lot of times that stress and them not being able to verbalize, like, oh, I'm feeling stressed. Maybe it's like, oh, I have a stomach ache, or even noticing that you kind of, if they're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, if they're kind of just sitting there in class, kind of maybe daydreaming, and like Ebony said, really looking at what's going on, switching the lens from like, okay, what's wrong, to like what's happening or what has happened, and really kind of exploring it from that way, because sometimes they can't verbalize something particular, or really listening. A lot of times when they're just coloring or something, they're just talking, you will find out a lot. So really listening to notice that that change in behavior for sure.
Great, thank you. And the other thing that I just wanted to add is, as a building principal, it's like, okay, I know all the high flyers, the kids that I see in the office all the time, but then there was another population that we often oversee, and that's the kids. They're quiet, they're withdrawn, they never say much, and so those are definitely children that we want to watch and try to engage to make sure that they're okay and all of their needs are being met. Mm-hmm. Bianca, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, so that's been most of my work within the schools. Before I started this company, I was a school social worker for the last 8 years. I worked in charter schools and multiple public school systems. And with that experience, I've learned a lot. The babies are my true heart, I will say. And when I think about parenting, 'cause, you know, as a parent now, and when I think about being a teacher in the education system and how we look at our children, when you say what we look for, and what we should look for in our children, I think sometimes we have to step back and not look at what's quote unquote societal wrong with our children, because coming from like a strength-based perspective, for instance, you have this child that is quote unquote defiant, but yet really they are actually very assertive. They are, they have an opinion, but we're taught, even culturally, to not speak, until an adult is finished or things like that. But yet this child has this quality that you really need to hone in on and pull out, and they can be the CEO of something, one day. So that's what I look at, and that's what I've tried to do a lot with my children. Of course, being the school social worker, I was sent all of the high flyers, in the building, and all of those children had strengths, and I think that if we could really focus in on those and not rise them as something maybe so negative. Sometimes I know that they present behaviors that align with different clinical, that are clinical syndromes and different clinical behavior disorders. But still, all in all, I think that sometimes children are really misunderstood and they really just don't know how to express themselves. So using outlets like art and music, those are so, important. You really can pull, a lot out. You can build that confidence, in children. So just looking at children just from a strengths perspective, and just figuring out and trying to identify what they really are good at to kind of build them out from there.
So, I was going to add one of the things I wanted to ask, and maybe someone, one of the ladies can respond to this. Right now, at what we're seeing with so many children at home, a gentleman I was speaking with earlier today, his son was crying because he had gotten additional math assignments because I guess his teacher wanted him to work on more math at home. Now, mind you, this home learning environment, you're getting quite a bit of work already. And so my colleague, we were in the meeting and he's like, my son is crying because of the assignments that he's having. And I asked him, well, do you think that he would be crying if he was at school? Or is he probably crying because he's at home, and how he behaves at home with school stuff is different than how he behaves at school with school stuff. So I share that scenario because I've even witnessed it myself here, that maybe one of you all can give us a little bit more perspective on some parenting support when we have our children at home as learners.
I think for me, starting off with one saying that a parent can go in and when they're looking at their child is always remember the saying, behavior is communication. And what is my child trying to communicate to me at this time? So you see this child that is crying, but like you said, you started to ask questions. Is it because he's at home? Is it because, what is something that I can essentially change? When you started to ask those questions, you thought about what you could change. And I think that that's a number one kind of concept that I will always teach my teachers as well. We can never change this child. They have these behaviors and these things that they've either learned or that they are born with, these type of personality traits. But what we can do is change our environment around them and how we deal with them to basically promote a better outcome. So starting off with those kind of things, behavior is communication. What is my child trying to communicate at this time? What is it that I can do within their environment or within their moment to change something? Because actually maybe trying to change them, you might get that power struggle between the parent and the child.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I would say,
thank you.
yeah, I think that with that, I mean, it's a stressful time for all of us as the parents, and like Ebony was saying, that behavior change. that kid is probably stressed. He's not at school anymore. It's the pandemic. Socially, I haven't been able to see my friends. It's a lot going on with these kids. I mean, and us as parents as well. And so I think recognizing that we are in the middle of the pandemic and that it is just a change for all of us. And the way some people handle change versus others are different. And so I think making it a priority, maybe even talking with a teacher, like, we are at home and I do understand that this is school, but we're pacing ourselves. He got to get, school just started a few weeks ago for some. And so we really got to get in the groove. And so maybe more math right now. We're pacing ourselves. So he's going to do what he can. But, just being honest with the teacher at this time as well, that a lot of things has changed and we got to get ourselves used to it. And it could be traumatic for some, especially for kids. We've never experienced this. And so I think recognizing that, and like Bianca was saying, we can't change the child. We could change the environment for sure. And looking at how our daily routine is set up and seeing what we can change about that. Of course, we're working and everything as well, but changing the environment, changing the workload, talking with the teachers, I think is really key.
Yeah.
And we did have a session that we'll be releasing that's talking about home environment for learning. And so I'm hoping that if you did not get a chance to see that session, that you would circle back to watch that session. But creating a quality home learning environment to this conversation about creating a quality mental health environment for home and using these techniques and tips will also be beneficial. Ebony, maybe you had something that you'd like to share on this home learning stress parent topic that we're discussing right now?
No, I think I agree with Kenisha and Bianca, right? Just again, reiterating that all behavior serves a purpose. And really, for the parent, not being afraid to advocate for your child. Like Kenisha was saying, maybe it's just about talking to the teacher and saying, listen, we can't do this right now, right? But also, just knowing that when your child is having a difficult time, it's a good idea to give them a choice. So if the teacher sent home, I don't know, 3 pages of math work, right? Maybe just asking your child, okay, would you like to do 1.5 page, or would you like to do all 3 pages, right? And then letting them choose what pages they want to do, because even with their education, like, things are different now, and just giving them a choice and helping them to feel included, because so many decisions are being made for them and no one is asking them what they need is a big deal right now.
I can kind of add just what I'm actually doing with my children at home. And I know every parent can't necessarily set up maybe an area, but at least, try to have a designated area for your children. Because I am, a social worker, I know that I'm probably doing something extra, but it really is so simple. For me, when I started off with virtual learning, I think balancing the work and their work is the toughest part. So essentially, I'm balancing my own mental health while balancing their workload and their mental health as their parent as well, because I'm monitoring their frustration levels as well. And so for me, the number one thing that I knew I had to start with was a schedule. Having that schedule is a tremendous help to both us, because they know what's coming up. They know what's expected, and even having a set of rules and expectations by their learning area. When we're in this area, separating this from the house, you might run around and play with the toys over here, but in this area, we have these, expectations. And number one, another really important thing that I set up was a behavior system. Both of my children have ADHD, so they are extremely hyperactive. And having that behavior system in place, just like they had in school, is really important to maintaining their behavior while they're working at home. And we do things, like a little jar system where they get little pom-poms and they earn a certain amount, and then, they're able to get TV time or the things that they're able to work with. That has helped change our lives at home. So those are actual real strategies.
I like those strategies. But there's also an opposite end of that spectrum, right? So even when I work in the schools and I would work with parents, a lot of times just hearing them say that for some of our kids, we wonder about what we would call challenging behaviors, right?
Yeah.
We wonder about their challenging behaviors, and it's just because there's too much structure for them. And so just knowing that like some structure is good, and if that's what works for you and your child, then like Bianca, absolutely do that, right? Because it just makes life a lot easier. But also having the flexibility to just say, okay, you know what? It's one of those days. Not everything needs to happen on a schedule. And so that gets two sides of the same coin. Like having a schedule, but also being able to be flexible or maybe fall somewhere in the middle of that so that you can control your own stress levels too.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you shared that because I had a situation here in my home where we've created the quality learning environment and everyone has their space. And actually over the weekend we added a treasure chest because I have a kindergartner here, a fourth grader here, and my niece who's a high school student who's in and out. And we have a dog. And so we had all this stuff going on. And so we're kind of really ordered. We talk about the time and the schedule and what's happening at different times of the day. But every so often, I'm like, okay, you can go on the living room on the couch, just turn the TV off. You can go into the bedroom and just do the assignment in there. And so creating a healthy balance between the two, because at a certain point I was feeling like we were going to have to start fighting a little bit more because I needed to find that middle space. So hearing from the both of you, you have to have the structure and the schedule is beneficial. I would go crazy without it. But sometimes my kids need me to just ease off a little and let them take some directed space and some permissions and take back some of power so that they can do some things. And so I appreciate both of those perspectives because I've been experiencing that as a person with children in my home in this COVID situation.
Oh yeah, we have a schedule, but we make changes because they're kids. So yeah, definitely not like it's 8 o'clock. You have to be it does life doesn't, I don't really know what will work like that with kids. I mean, that wouldn't work. But no, just having just a kind of I would just say just a foundation, just so you know that this is what we have to do today. But following time specifically, I think that in everybody's world right now, everybody is balancing so much. I don't think that would necessarily work for sure.
Kimberly, I know you had some things that you wanted us to speak on as well. I want us to make sure that we cover all the topics because this is an important conversation. That was my polite way of finding out if she was on because for some reason I thought she was gone. So
Totally blanked out. Happy to be back. But in terms of the pandemic, have you seen any trends in our community as it relates to social isolation, fear, and depression? And what are some strategies or what is being done to address some of these issues? And we'll start with you, Kenisha. Maybe you could walk us through maybe some mindfulness activity that you have.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kimberly. I think what I'm seeing is a lot of exposure. What I'm noticing is a lot of exposure to what's going on, right? I've seen and witnessed people get really worked up to things that are essentially out of our control. And so I think that we need to, just like we talk about mental health and what you take in, not only physically, but what you take in, what you see, what you listen to, what you take in spiritually, you have to monitor that. And you have to realize how much is too much when it comes to watching the news, when it comes to all of these things that we can't change. Because I don't know about you guys, but when you see certain things, I could feel a physical reaction in my body that I'm reacting to certain things. And so I think just limiting that is very crucial, is very important. I think bringing yourself to the present moment. A lot of times we're thinking ahead that we don't know what's going to happen for sure. We can plan and predict, but we don't really know or we're thinking of things that has already happened that we can't go back and change, but we're still stuck there. And so really making sure that we are in the present moment. And so as far as doing some mindfulness techniques to kind of just bring you there, checking in with yourself, even as if that's just taking a few deep breaths. You can place a hand over your heart, noticing the heartbeat, noticing the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. And so using that as an anchor, when we think of the way a boat lets down an anchor, that could be our anchor. Maybe listening to music or the sounds around us. It doesn't even have to be music. Noticing what works for you as far as aromatherapy. I know one thing that I do for self-care that I have to do is like a nice hot shower. And so what I do is light incense, and the combination of the steam from the shower and the smoke from the incense, something that smells good, and then playing music while I'm in there. So for those 25 minutes or so, that's like a self-care routine. Where I'm essentially doing aromatherapy with the smell, noticing the water on my skin. So just noticing all of that. But just taking some time to take like at least 3 deep breaths, intentional breaths. Because if we don't pay attention to our breathing, it's shallow, we don't notice it, but intentional deep breaths. And teach it to our kids. We could all take a moment together. Sometimes when things get a little overwhelming, we could just say, stop the kids, stop everything. And we all just kind of do this activity together.
Great, thank you. Bianca?
As far as seeing any trends in our community, I kind of have seen a lot of our community being affected since the George Floyd situation, happened, and that having a big role on our mental health. Like Kenisha said, things that we see were, not to say that we didn't pay attention before, because I think that everyone did, but it's so highlighted, right now, and it's very tense sometimes, and you can feel it in your body, in your chest. It's kind of sometimes uncomfortable, in a work environment. You don't know what people are thinking. You don't know what's on their mind. You don't even know how your neighbor is looking at you, so it's a lot of that, and that overthinking sometimes can cause like anxiety, So like Kenisha said, just figuring, I think when it comes to coping skills is all about essentially what you like, because in that moment, a coping skill is going to make you feel good. It's going to calm you down. It's going to regulate you. So I know that, like with working with people, we have these lists. You can Google coping skills, and it's 101 coping skills. But I can suggest you to deep breathe, or I can suggest you to take a walk, but that's not really what you like to do. Then that's really not, you're not going to revert to that when you come across adversity. So I think really understanding who you are and really understanding like what you like, those type of things really will help with identifying these coping skills to be able to deal with this anxiety and depression that our community is kind of suffering from right now.
Great, thank you, Bianca. Ebony?
Sure. So I agree with what Bianca and Kenisha have already said, right? Don't have a lot to add. It's just the trend, like Bianca just said, in anxiety, depression, and anxiety like symptoms, right? I've seen a huge increase in, and I make a distinction between anxiety and anxiety like symptoms, because just because you have some of the symptoms does not mean you would be classified to have what we would consider clinical anxiety, or the same with depression, right? Clinical depression. So I have seen a huge increase in people with symptoms, but also people who would actually qualify as having clinical anxiety or depression, and some of the things you can do, or some of the things they've already mentioned. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. I'm sorry. How do we advocate and promote awareness around mental health and lessen the stigma of it being bad or undesirable to talk about and seek help? What are some things that we can do? Ebony?
Sure. So I think educating yourself, right, about mental health, and really just knowing what it truly is one of the easiest things that you can do. And for most of us, when we have information, we're able to make better decisions, right? So that education piece. And then if you're really curious about how mental health works or what's really going on, maybe finding some event that you can volunteer at that has something to do with mental health, right? That way you can kind of get a firsthand look in all of the stereotypes that we have that say people are crazy who go to therapy, right? Like there's really got to be something wrong with you in order for you to get help for your mental health. Then if you find an event that you can volunteer at, right, maybe you'll actually see that no,
That's great advice.
People who use these services aren't crazy, right? This has been recorded, so I don't know if it's just my voice, if you can see my air quotations.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those are just two of the very basic things you can do about educating yourself and then volunteering somewhere.
Great, great. Thank you. Kenisha, did you have anything?
Yeah, I would say just following, to me, like social media, especially in our community, Black women, Black people, that is a real stigma of ours. And so I know just here locally, just a few people that I say are really trying to break that stigma. I know for sure a young woman I go to church with, Tawana, like she has a whole social media of just like breaking the stigma of mental illness, or you know, what that looks like. And so Mind Your Mental, another Black woman, Felicia McGee, is the healing strategist, and just really offering up a lot of advice on how to really take care of ourselves mentally. And so I think just really noticing how you feel when you hear the word mental health or mental illness. And like Ebony said, getting involved in some stuff to really kind of change your mind. It's a lot of things in Flint. Well, right now with the pandemic, a lot of things we can't do in person, but online, there's a lot of events. NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Health or Mental Illness, is having an event. So really doing some research and seeing what you can do to kind of change your idea around what mental illness or mental health is.
Great, thank you. Bianca?
Yeah, when I think about the stigma in our community with mental health, I think about starting off small, you know, with our family. I think that if I'm able, I think it's not one person that can say that their family doesn't have someone that has some sort of mental illness. I just don't think that that is physically possible. That's how common, you know, mental illnesses are. And even say something like, you know, I had, maybe they weren't clinically diagnosed, but I've experienced these mental health symptoms before. I think that that essentially is where this stigma originally came from. You know, our families have taught us to not speak. We don't even speak necessarily amongst each other. So I'm not going to go out, you know, we were taught not to, you don't tell house business, okay? So I'm not going to go out and feel comfortable in front of a crowd or tell my friend or tell my friend's friend that, you know, or join a conversation about mental health when I can't even say that, you know, my cousin has schizophrenia, or my grandmother suffered from, you know, depression, or, you know, someone in my family committed suicide. I think that we have to feel comfortable talking like amongst ourselves and teaching our children. And I mean, having those family conversations, that's what Sunday dinner is, you know, is for, right? Like, let's get down and talk. Let's talk about what's going on in our family. I think that that will help us to be able to talk to the world and be able to kind of just be in our truth and just be who we are.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Danielle, did you have anything to add?
Well, you know, when we're talking about techniques and just all these different things that we could be doing, I just started making a little note, especially right now when we're all, so many of us are home so often. I've never been home as much as I've been home since March. It's almost like March was the beginning of a new year and a new life, because I've never been home this much.
Yes.
But one of the things that I've noticed is I'm being more intentional about opening up my blinds and opening up the curtains and going into my yard and just walking a little, taking the children to do something different, creating new habits, and spending time um, sharing with people that I care about and that I know care about me, being really super intentional around anger. Why am I mad? Why am I holding on to being at? What could I be doing differently so that I can choose to feel better? We know that a lot of times mental health is something that you need treatment with a trained and licensed person. But as Ebony was sharing, there are certain symptoms that are like. I really like you sharing that. These anxiety-like symptoms, depression-like symptoms. Some people do need to see someone licensed, but sometimes you need to stand up, put on a clean outfit, take a nice hot shower and let it smell real good, and then put on the best lotion you have and try to do something just a little different. And so I just am I'm so happy that we're all able to come together today. And we know that we can make it. The things that have been going on in our community lately with violent crimes and deaths, and these are things that have been going on though for generations, and now we're in a space where we're saying that this is an important conversation and it's not okay. But what do you do with that information once you have it? Do you just put it in your heart and just have to mull it over? Or do you do something a little different with the things that you're learning how to do? Being a parent that's teaching at home and scheduling and all these things. And so all that said, I'm really happy that all of you all were here to help us to initiate this conversation, and that I think we need to continue to have, and that we hold each other to some levels of accountability. Like, well, what did you do different? What did you add to your life? And how did that addition? I was sitting here, I don't know if you all saw me doing the deep breathing. It's not something I do very often, but I feel better when I do it. And so, did someone remind me to do it? Yes, Kenisha, you reminded me to breathe today. And hopefully that'll make my day a little bit better, and it'll make the days of other people a little better as we strive to help our community be better in totality.
Great. Thank you, Danielle, for those closing remarks. Ebony, do you have any closing remarks for us this afternoon?
I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It has been lovely to be on a panel with you ladies. And definitely, if you're looking for some resources, one of the places you can start, like Kenisha mentioned earlier, is with NAMI. It's the Genesee County chapter, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, right? There is actually an event coming up. So you can log on to their Facebook page and see all about that. And then if you absolutely need a place to start, just start there, because it's a local chapter and we're always happy to help.
Great. Thank you so much. Kenisha?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me. And I'm glad Danielle brought up a lot of the stuff. We are at home. A lot of us are at home a lot more. So like she said, opening the blinds, maybe even getting a house plant if we don't have one. Just doing those simple things, making sure we get outside at least 15 minutes or more a day to get that natural vitamin D, to get those feel good hormones going. Just noticing that what self-care look like for you may be different for me or you, but do whatever makes you feel good. And I would say, just like Ebony said, with NAMI has some events coming up. Serenity House is another local place. I'm on the board of that organization, but it helps with healing trauma. It also, with another thing we don't like to talk about, like mental health, addiction. And so really helping with addiction recovery. So just checking out just a lot of the local community things that's right here in Flint that can really help.
Thank you so much. Bianca?
Yes, thank you for having me. I've learned so much from you ladies. This was definitely a great opportunity. I love to be able to talk with parents and children and be able to get them resources that they need. And I think I really liked what you said. That word intentional. I think that's what we all said today, is just everything that we say. Make it intentional. Practice, try it. You have to intentionally just stop what you're doing and just focus and really put forth an effort to hone in on managing your mental health, and just keep pushing. We are all in it together.
Yes, great. Thank you so much. And just thank you, ladies, for the opportunity to have this very important discussion this afternoon around mental health. It will not be the last time that we come together. I am so happy that I met you, and we hope to continue this partnership. So just know that if there's anything that you need in way of support or encouragement, you have my email, you have my phone, anything that you need in terms of resources, we are here to help. These are hard times, they are difficult times, but we must stay motivated. We must stay encouraged. We are leaders in each of our respective places, and the community, our family, and our children are looking to us, and we are certainly not going to let them down. So stay the course and go team go. Thank you guys so much for a great conversation. Keep up the good work and have a great afternoon. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.